All right, and we are back with the news gang. Certain bromance has been going on, Yvonne. Or is it on, is it off?
On again, off again, perhaps as typically happens, you know, with lovebirds. But this is interesting. I mean, the events, I think it's very embarrassing. I think what happened in the case of Daniel Manduku, and I think that's, you know, where it all began. We had been sold a trifecta, you know, in the war against corruption. So that's the head of the EACC, DCI, and the DPP. And so far, so good. But then, you know, whatever happens on Monday happens. And I find it interesting because I think this is the month that the DPP will be celebrating his second year in office. He has a one-term non-renewable of 8 years. It's barely, you know, halfway into his term. But then, you know, what happens? Daniel Manduku is arrested on a Monday. He's taken to court the next day. And the investigating officer produces a charge sheet which does not have his number. The prosecutor is saying, I don't know, we haven't approved this. And, you know, on just that small technicality, then, you know, Daniel Manduku is freed. I mean, it's very untidy, not necessarily between the two of them, but between the officers that work for them.
But I think, Yvonne, I think, Yvonne, and we'll speak about the Manduku case in a moment, but I think the two gentlemen should have known that those bromances, the public bromances in Kenya don't end up
They end in tears.
Yeah, because, I mean, we still remember white shirts,
matching red ties,
matching ties, and
rolled up sleeves.
Everybody now knows what happened to that.
Right.
But here is, and when you do it publicly, the fallout will also be public. Yeah. Because, I mean, if
you invited the public into your romance,
if we didn't see this impression created by the two gentlemen in the first place that, you know, we are here, we are doing this together.
BFFs.
Yeah, you know, the best of friends. Yeah, I mean, we would not even be trying to figure out, is something happening? It's more like, you know, people who do all this, it is called public display of...
PDA.
That one.
PDA,
they do it
DFF,
on social media
Bromance.
and whatever. When things go wrong, people really follow you. Like, hey, you know, you gave us pictures of this and that place. What really happened? So I think that is part of the problem, where a lot of these things are a bit too public. But then you realize that, I mean, in this country where there are so many problems, everybody tries to save themselves. Let me put mine out there. If anything happens later down the road, at least I told you this was what was going on. But overall, it looks bad when two offices in which Kenyans have so much confidence. Remember when these two gentlemen, actually I should say three, came onto the scene about 2 years ago, there was so much optimism. Remember the war on corruption that is called a war is a misnomer, because there's no war. You can't have a war when there are no casualties. So there's been a problem over the years, and so people are baying for somebody's blood. People want to see blood on the floor, that this is someone who was accused of stealing ABCD. They have gone through the process, and now they are spending time at committee or wherever it is, wanakula marage pale. That is what a lot of people want to hear, but it doesn't seem to get there. So the frustration is founded. It is not unwarranted. It is genuine. People are genuinely frustrated, and therefore when small things like what happened with Manduku yesterday happen, it really infuriates people. Like, you get that the same old deja vu, like, you know, this is
same old,
we are back to the same thing that we've always seen. So that, to that extent, actually, it's quite sad.
It's pretty untidy. Untidy in the sense that the war against corruption, let me use that misnomer, if you allow, should be in such a way that it's extremely tidy, so that people are able to follow the process. However, over a period of time, you realize that the optimism that was there, you know, about a year ago, 2 years ago, on the fight against corruption, in one way or another is waning. And probably there's a reason for that. When people are arrested and they're taken to court and they're out on bail, you see them around, people start asking, "Ai, na hii kitu, is it really genuine? Is it really yielding any fruit?" So when you have the kind of a situation that we had with Dr. Manduku juzi, the day before yesterday, it sends a very bad impression. And probably it's an opportunity for the two offices to make their things a bit neat, a bit tidy. But I also think once in a while it's good for them to fall out. Why? And especially if they fall out on principle. Their roles are distinct. One is the investigator, the other is the prosecutor. if you're the prosecutor, don't agree to prosecute something if there is no sufficient evidence. I mean, it should be that basic. Because at the end of the day, people will evaluate your performance based on what you took to court. So if you take half-baked cases to court and suspects are acquitted, then the blame will be on the prosecutor, because he ought to do due diligence. So I think once in a while, it is good for them to disagree, to fall out. Let them disagree on principle. Let them disagree on content. Let them disagree on the number of cases and the quality. It shouldn't be about quantity, but rather about quality. Would rather take a few people to court and conclusively, decisively, prosecute them effectively, and we yield some convictions and a return of the looted resources. Therein, people will see this war is heading somewhere. But if we take too many people to court, too many suspects, we may end up with nothing.
I think there is something that Kenyans liked about the optics that were at play when DCI Kinoti and DPP Haji came to the scene. Because at the time, remember, there was a lot of frustration about this whole question of corruption and prosecution and lack thereof. Now, the two must realize the honeymoon is over. Holding hands in public or working together right now is as inappropriate as it ought to be, because right now it's about delivery. It's time that both departments started counting what they have delivered to Kenyans. And when it comes to the relations between the two officers, really one cannot do without the other, because the investigative arm will bring all the files and the details with which convictions or cases must be prosecuted. There are a number of questions that must then be raised right now. And this is a concern that I've gathered just by observing the office of the DPP for the last few years now. You know, DPP Haji must be aware that a tree doesn't make a forest. It can be a fantastic new addition to the office of the DPP, but he must cultivate a team. And that team must start being seen as the face of prosecution in this country. Because it cuts an image of the only reformer in the office of the DPP. What is the next biggest name in the office of the DPP?
Dorcas?
Dorcas. And Dorcas, we rarely see her these days. We don't see her. When it came to the high-profile Kimwarer case, a private prosecutor had to be engaged. Ali Taib. We're yet to see his performance.
Qureshi with the one with Mwilu. DCJ.
Yes, although Qureshi didn't go through because there was an objection.
Yes.
But now he needs to be aware that this is important. It's important that he starts attracting good talent into the Directorate of Public Prosecution. Let's say very colorful lawyers capable of prosecuting cases energetically and passionately. We are not seeing that. When you go to court and you see a number of times a prosecutor mumbling something, again, as compared to the noise and vibrance of the defense lawyers. This is something that needs to change, and DPP Haji needs to get down to work in terms of just building a new Directorate of Prosecution. When it comes to the DCI, I think by breaking or disbanding the flying squad and replacing it with something else, he's putting a footprint, his own structures in place. We need to see similar things with Haji.
Some would say that perhaps some of these things take time. I mean, I think there's the plea bargaining. There's what happened today with those, is it 5 or so banks that were involved in NYS and choosing not to prosecute and getting back over 300 million shillings.
85 million.
Yes, in penalties. But even then, there's some, and I don't know what you think around the table, that have said that even with the high-profile arrests, in and of itself, even though we haven't seen the conclusion of the cases, that it has served some sort of deterrent, value or factor. I mean, if you take a look at it in 2 years, those former MD of those in Kenya Power, Kenta Rus, Ben Chumo, 12 others. There was DCJ Mwilu. There was Lilian Omolo, remember, and 12 others, including Richard Dubai. Yes. In the NYS, there's the Salai Dam, although we know, that ended, rather badly for the DPP. There's Busia Governor, there's Mohamed Swazuri, there's Atanas Maina from Kenya Railways. I mean, there's just, quite a number of these. The NHIF CEO, the former CEO, Simon Kirgoti, and the current, at the time, Jeffrey Gitau, Joe Sang from Kenya Pipeline. And that some say that in and of itself, that at least, some of these high-profile arrests and charges in court, have helped to just show, okay, listen, we're serious about it. And these are just sort of the high-profile ones that we're naming. There have been a number of others. There's plea bargaining. There's a number of other things that have been introduced in terms of getting the most culpable suspects and getting others as witnesses, asset recovery, what we saw with Woodley. But then again, in a country where corruption has been so deep seated, like you said, everybody is baying.
My question then would be, and then? So, once you arrest very many people, take very many people to court, it is not that, probably, in my opinion, it's not the number of people that you arrest, but the number of people that you successfully prosecute. If you're to prosecute, let's say, just 5 out of all those people that you've mentioned, successfully so, with heavy penalties and recovery of the resources that they are alleged to have mismanaged, it will send a bigger message that corruption is painful, mismanagement of public resources cannot be condoned. But it will get to a point where people will no longer care if you're arrested or not. In fact, there's always this joke around that all you need to do is to arm yourself with enough money such that when you're granted bail, you will pay and go back to normal business.
And in that case, would it be the DPP or the courts? Because granting bail is...
it is, but more importantly, if you have solid evidence, it will send a better message, a better statement, a more clear message. But even in the courts, even as we claim or we argue that the judges are granting suspects, small bail, if you have solid evidence, it will work more. It shouldn't be about the numbers. It should be about the quality, quantity versus quality. But if we bridge that gap, then I think we'll be.
And again, I say, without reforming the Directorate of the Public Prosecution, those results will not be achieved. The formlessness you are describing here, Mara, there is plea bargain. By the way, good prosecutors will not rush to parade people that they have,
and then later turn back and
they'll not, because the first instance is get the most punishment you can, you can secure. Then the rest is further down the line. I think starting with plea bargain and coming in a press conference with people who have handled and helped movement of money that has been stolen from NYS, that is ridiculous.
Well, I think the public display, all these things that happen in media and you see people in court, there's a deterrent effect that it has. I mean, there's no doubt about that. There is nobody who can enjoy the kind of limelight that we have seen these people in over the period that they've been doing this. I mean, everybody, that's why they cover their faces there. No one wants to be associated with that thing, even if later you're going to be... It's
shameful.
It is very shameful, even if later you might be proved innocent and that sort of thing. Look at, for example, the Ngiritas. I mean, no one knows if they're guilty or not. The courts will determine that. But look at the kind of agony that that they're dealing with. That, money, German, all of these things. But you can see there is a problem that something has been disrupted in that life. Whether those claims, the monies, everything is true or not. But definitely, this is someone who is completely out of the usual comfort zone. And that is something that I think can't be taken for granted. So it has its place there. But like Francis was saying, at the end of the day, this will really have that lasting deterrent effect if people actually go to jail or whatever measures they are supposed to get from a legal standpoint, they actually get it. And so this thing will not function if the DCI does not get solid evidence, if the DPP does not evaluate the files correctly and make the right decisions in terms of prosecution, and if the courts are not aligned in the sense that the courts themselves will look at the evidence, bearing in mind how serious the the corruption problem is, because I think it's not enough for them to just deal with technicalities, or you didn't do this and whatever. I think at the end of the day, the judiciary should also go out of its way to find where that story is in this whole thing, because I mean, we've seen what's going on right now. When you're charged with corruption, because probably you have a lot of money around you, you get the best lawyers in this town, and so the DPP's office will not be able to match all those guys. You see the biggest names you have ever seen in the legal profession ranged against some prosecutor somewhere. Then you really just have to sympathize.
And here's the other interesting thing, because we talk about this particular fallout with Daniel Manduku, but yet there have been some serious cases where we've seen lack of communication, cooperation, or interaction between the DPP and the DCI. So take the Salai Dam case, for example. I mean, that case was thrown out on what, and I'm not a legal mind, but what sounded like a technicality. The judge said there was lack of willingness and support from the office of the DPP in prosecuting the case. Why? Because there was 18 months of adjournments. And even when you take a look at their guidelines on prosecution, even for them, 3 adjournments is enough cause to review the case. Take a look at the other one with Swazuri. Remember, after he was arrested, and then there was a computer with what they called crucial evidence that was still lying at the NLC offices, at the lands office, and it went missing. You would have to wonder the custody of evidence and who takes care that if we say this notebook here is, serious evidence, why did they not secure it? That's not the only one. In the Kenya Power case, in fact, a witness from the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority came in and said, in fact, he was guided by the DCI in how to do the investigations. He said it was done selectively, and that, he was sort of guided towards a particular outcome. And even there, again, how they handle evidence, the manner in which they handle the cases. And that would then start to tell you that there was trouble even before this case with Manduku.
Those are the questions, Yvonne, that I'm saying the DPP Haji ought to address. He needs to look below the surface, look within his own directorate and see how has it been functioning. Because it's so simple that the DCI can bring a file and the prosecutor would say, I'm not satisfied with how the file is. Which is perhaps what is informing all these full disclosure press conferences, which is put all the evidence in the public. I've done my part. And you look at it, you look at the face of it, what is that the DPP people find it so difficult to convert into a charge in court? What is left? What is that they are not, that only they can see? I see the Directorate of Public Prosecution as a potential bottleneck, which is why DPP Haji really needs to look within his own department and see whether he's got the service that he's requiring. Because he also comes with the disadvantage of not being part of the system that is the Directorate of Public Prosecution. We know very well Haji is an outsider. He has never been in court to prosecute a case, for example. He's never been a prosecutor. This is the first time he's a prosecutor. So some of these things, could his own people be running circles around him? Could they be the ones now frustrating cases? Because it could be difficult to frustrate it elsewhere when people are being arrested, but you can frustrate it at the file stage. You all know, and we've all had these stories of files disappearing, for example, in court. That is usually the next stage now, where you go and work with the registry. Just make a file disappear. So the DPP's office, events there need to be looked at very, very deeply, because I think it's very interesting that some cases are not happening.
I hear Robert telling us to take a break, but there's one fundamental principle. I'm no investigator, I'm no prosecutor, but I would think there's one principle in this criminal justice system: impartiality, fairness, and objectivity. If there is a perception that certain cases are being rushed, certain files are being hurriedly handled, while others are being kept in a certain locker room, on a certain desk, too hot to handle, then it creates the wrong impression that this fight against corruption is for certain people and not certain people. For example, this KPA story has been running since September, August last year. And see what happened when Dr. Manduku is arrested and taken to court? Nothing happens, so to say. There's that one critical file that has been all over and doesn't seem to be very easy to handle, the Ruaraka land scam. What became of it? The back and forth on that file is very interesting. Is it that it contains people that probably are too hot to handle, too sensitive to deal with? Those are some of the perceptions that must be dealt with. And then finally, and I thought this can come up around this table, when the DCI is accused of prosecuting cases in public, I spoke to a certain judge and he was telling me that it makes them very uncomfortable. Uncomfortable in the sense that details of a particular case are already out there before the file is on your desk. So the impression the public will have is that if you acquit, even when probably there is no enough evidence, people will claim that, Judge ABCD was bribed or was, was not serious enough to deal with a certain matter. So maybe these are some of the issues that need to be thrashed out, and probably could be the reasons why we are seeing this kind of friction between the two offices.
Break time. #NewsGang. We'll be right back.